Turn down the heat, Jamaica. Turn down the heat. Why a 4 degrees Celsius warmer world must be avoided was a report for the World Bank that was done by the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research and Climate Analytics. Over the course of the past 3 weeks, this report was a chief resource material from which I was duly educated and informed of the essentials of climate change, the factors responsible for this reality, and the resulting compound and domino effect. The warming of the planet is primarily the result of human interference, producing or generating increasing amounts of emissions, such as CO2, that have resulted in warming similar to how a greenhouse generates warmth for its contents. The more are generated, the warmer becomes the average temperature of the globe. Through the years, I often heard that direct consequences of increased greenhouse gas emissions were global warming, climate change, sea level rise, threatened coastal cities, and threatened ecosystems. What I never knew and learned from this course is that the tropics, inclusive of Jamaica where I live, is projected to experience the most significant increase in heat extremes in a world where the mean temperature is more than 4 degrees Celsius warmer than pre-industrial temperatures. This means that temperatures experienced would be 5 to 6 times more than the normal annual variations in temperature experienced today. Essentially, a new climatic regime would be created, with the vulnerability of the tropics to these projected and never before experienced temperatures. Though developing countries are not bound by targets under the Kyoto Protocol, they are still required to reduce emissions. Considering the threat of global warming and sea level rise for the leading foreign exchange earner for Jamaica, tourism, the modification of the coastline by sea level rise, and the more intense and apparently more frequent hurricanes. There's also the threat to wetlands from sea level rise and deforestation amongst other projected impacts. It is reasonable to wonder if anything has been done as a country to play its part in adaptation and mitigation measures. Has it been a fair display of our capabilities and capacity, despite being a developing country? In the final quarter of 2013, the government of Jamaica through the EU and UNEP completed milestones under the Climate Change Adaptation and Disaster Risk Reduction Project. Mangrove restoration of more than 7 hectares across multiple sites. Seagrass bed restoration was also undertaken in Negril. There was installation of artificial reef in the Negril Marine Park. There was also installation of mooring and marker buoys, 45 in total. Data loggers were also installed to monitor sea temperature in 5 marine parks across the country. There was also the establishment of a small grants fund for developing alternative livelihoods to those that exploited the natural coastal resources. There was the organic farming of pumpkin and sorrel. There was also the establishment of a sea moss farm and rainwater harvesting, as well as beekeeping. The project also looked to restore beaches, and there was a test done using the shore lock technology. The Forestry Department has engaged in reforestation and agroforestry activities, thus producing or creating additional carbon sinks for the emissions generated. The Met Services have sought to undertake some matters of public education, such as local singers engaging local young artists to sing songs written for the purpose of educating about climate change. In recent years, the storm surges have been so great that areas never before impacted are now being impacted by these. Here is the main thoroughfare along the Palisado Strip that takes you to the Norman Manley International Airport. After one hurricane, the sand dunes that were on the ocean side of the road were moved to the middle of the road and to the harbor side. The National Works Agency, after observations of the impact of more intense storm surges and hurricanes on the southeast coast of Jamaica, commissioned works through a Chinese contractor for the Palisados roadway to be raised and rock revetment installed as part of shoreline protective measures. Despite the implemented adaptation and mitigation measures, there have been observations of behaviors, practices, and regulations that counter the reduction of emission of greenhouse gases. Vehicles have been seen on the street, generating black visible emissions on the streets of the capital. There is also prolific burning of solid waste throughout the city. The location of some of these fires and burning are even adjacent to the municipal disposal site. In this picture, we see the disposal site in the background. That hill, it's really a mound of solid waste which has been uncompacted and uncovered. Thus, there is release of methane to the atmosphere. Ironically, air quality discharge licenses issued to facilities do not have emission standards for carbon dioxide, methane, or any other greenhouse gas. There is also no requirement for fees to be paid for the emission of greenhouse gases, as there are for the likes of sulfur dioxide, particulate matter, lead, and others. To turn down the heat in Jamaica, we need to contribute to the efforts to reduce emissions. Can Jamaica do more? Yes, we can. There are low-hanging fruits that can be picked without expensive interventions. No motor vehicle with visible emissions should drive by a traffic police without being ticketed or the vehicle seized. The enforcement thrust of the Public Health Department, the Solid Waste Management Authority, and the National Environment and Planning Agency needs to embrace a coordinated approach to enforce current laws and regulations that forbid the nuisance caused by open burning. The management of solid waste needs to include basic operational procedures such as compaction and covering of waste in the short term, with a commitment to explore landfill gas capture, which has the potential for diversifying further the energy profile as a country. Last but not least, there needs to be an immediate effort to address the shortcomings of the air quality discharge licenses that fail to acknowledge or address greenhouse gases. These are the bare minimum if Jamaica, as a small island state, is to have a significant pride in its effort to reduce anthropogenic sources of greenhouse gases and turn down the heat.